Disclaimer: this story explores mature emotional themes, including complex personal dynamics and boundary-testing situations. It does not contain explicit content. Viewer discretion is advised. I never planned on spending part of my summer vacation trapped in a small mountain rental with my stepson and his best friend, both 22, loud, and full of energy that I had long since outgrown. But sometimes life doesn't ask. It just throws you in. Let me rewind. We were supposed to be a full group. A big family getaway in a cabin upstate, me, my husband, his son from a previous marriage, a few of our mutual friends, and a couple of his college buddies. The plan was simple: hiking, barbecues, board games, and maybe too much wine. But one by one, people dropped out. First, my husband got called into work last minute, something about a system failure he was the only one qualified to fix. "Just go without me," he said, kissing my forehead as he pulled an overnight bag together. "You could use the break." Then the others followed, cancellations piling up until all that was left were the three of us: me, Chris, my stepson, and Jalen, his best friend. We almost canceled the trip. Should have, probably. But the cabin was paid for, bags were already packed, and honestly, I didn't think too hard about it. I figured we'd go, stay a night or two, enjoy the views, and head home early. No big deal. The drive up was fine. Uneventful. Chris and Jalen talked nonstop in the back seat, like they were still in high school. I played chauffeur, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying to stay engaged. Chris had always been polite, if a little guarded. Jalen, though, he was different. Warm. Observant. The kind of guy who made eye contact and really listened when you spoke. The dynamic between the two of them had always made me smile. Jalen balanced Chris out, smoothed his rougher edges. Like a brother, but not quite. The first day at the cabin was normal. Light snow flurries. A quick grocery run. We played cards after dinner and called it an early night. The second night, the power went out. No storm, no warning, just a sharp click and darkness. We lit a few candles, turned on the gas fireplace, and waited it out. At first, it was almost fun. Cozy. Like we were in one of those survival shows, except with snacks. Then the temperature dropped. Fast. The guest rooms at the far end of the cabin, where Chris and Jalen were staying, lost heat completely. The vents were blowing cold air, and no amount of extra blankets could fix it. So, they came to the main room, where the fire was still going strong. And just like that, the three of us were sharing one space, surrounded by flickering shadows and far too much silence. It was past midnight when Chris finally passed out on the floor, wrapped burrito style in a sleeping bag. Which left me and Jalen awake, facing each other across a narrow couch. He didn't say much. Just looked at me, expression unreadable, the glow from the fire lighting up the sharp line of his jaw. I should have gone to bed. I tried to go to bed. But something in the air had shifted. Some invisible thread stretched too tight between us. Not inappropriate, just charged. Like there was something unsaid sitting heavy in the room. And when Jalen finally broke the silence, what he said was the last thing I expected. "Do you ever feel like you're not where you're supposed to be?" His voice was quiet, honest. And suddenly, I realized this trip wasn't going to be simple at all. I didn't answer Jalen right away. "Do you ever feel like you're not where you're supposed to be?" he'd asked, his voice calm, but not casual. It hung in the air between us like fog, thick, slightly dangerous, and impossible to ignore. I stared at the fire for a while, listening to the soft hum of Chris snoring in the corner. Then I finally said, "All the time." It surprised me how easily that came out. I hadn't meant to be that honest. But something about the cabin, the silence, the cold, it stripped things down. Jalen didn't look away. If anything, he seemed relieved. Like he'd been waiting for someone to admit it first. We didn't talk about it after that, not directly. But the next morning, something had shifted. We were polite, careful. Chris was oblivious, cracking jokes while making scrambled eggs. acting like this was a spring break trip and not the strange, slow-burning pressure cooker it had become. The power came back sometime after noon. The heat returned. Chris moved back to his room. But I noticed Jalen didn't. Not right away. He lingered near the fireplace, claiming it was just warmer here, but his eyes said otherwise. There was something unresolved between us now, something neither of us fully understood. I kept busy. Cleaned the kitchen twice. Took a long walk in the snow. Answered work emails I'd been ignoring. Still, I couldn't stop replaying the night before. The thing is, I wasn't supposed to relate to Jalen, not this much. He was young, confident, on track for law school, if Chris was to be believed. His world was just beginning. Mine? I was 41. I'd been married 7 years, had a career I liked well enough, and a routine that mostly worked. But lately, I'd been feeling displaced. Like I was watching my life instead of living it. Maybe Jalen sensed that. Maybe that's why he asked what he did. Over the next day or two, we drifted into a strange rhythm. Chris went off on solo hikes or disappeared into his headphones for hours. Jalen and I kept finding ourselves in the same room. Cooking, folding laundry, drinking coffee at the same time. Nothing happened. Not physically. But the emotional weight was building. Quiet moments began to carry too much meaning. Once, I caught him really watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, and the look in his eyes wasn't flirtatious. It was searching, as if he was trying to read something written across my face. That night, I woke to the sound of the front door creaking open. I got up, thinking maybe Chris had stepped out for air, but it was Jalen sitting on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket, smoking a cigarette I hadn't known he had. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He nodded. "Couldn't sleep." "Same," I said, and sat beside him. The cold cut through my sweater, but I didn't care. We sat in silence for a while, staring into the woods. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Chris told me once he thinks you settled. That you married his dad because you were tired of starting over." My stomach dropped. He looked at me then. Not smug, more like he was sorry for saying it, but also like he needed me to know. "I don't think that's true," he added. "But I think maybe you're still figuring that out." I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because deep down, I wasn't sure he was wrong. The next morning, I avoided both of them. I took the longest shower I could justify and stood under the hot water until my fingers pruned. When I finally came out, the cabin smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast, Chris's doing, no doubt. He was always too generous with the heat settings on the toaster. Jalen was sitting on the edge of the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, casual like nothing had been said the night before. But I couldn't shake it. "Chris said you settled." That sentence had lodged itself in my brain like a splinter, tiny but impossible to ignore. It wasn't just what Jalen had said, it was the fact that he was the one saying it. Quiet, observant Jalen, who normally stayed out of the mess. Now he was in it, whether he meant to be or not. Chris caught me staring too long into my coffee mug. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well." He grinned. "Yeah, the couch isn't great." He had no idea what kind of weight was sitting on that couch the night before. No clue that his best friend and his stepmother were teetering on the edge of something they couldn't name and definitely shouldn't explore. Later that day, the weather shifted again. Snow turned to sleet. Roads iced over. We were effectively stuck. The mountain town we were in wasn't built for storms like this. Even if we wanted to leave, we couldn't. Not yet. By the second storm day, the cabin felt smaller. The silence felt louder. Jalen had gone quiet too. Not cold, just distant. I think we both knew the moment on the porch crossed a line not because anything happened, but because it almost did. And almost, sometimes, is worse. Then something unexpected happened. Chris found an old camcorder in a cabinet near the fireplace, a dusty, half-working relic probably left by a past guest. He was amused, naturally, and spent the better part of the afternoon recording silly confessionals, pretending we were trapped in a horror movie. At one point, he turned the camera on me. "Say something dramatic," he prompted, laughing. I smiled, tried to play along. "I fear this may be the last time we see sunlight," I said, monotone. Chris cracked up. Jalen chuckled too, from the couch. The tension softened for just a second. And then Chris said something that made everything crack again. "I should upload this whole trip to my vlog channel. Vacation with my stepmom and my best friend, clickbait gold, right?" He was joking, of course. But he had no idea how true that title might become. I left the room soon after, muttering something about needing to call my husband. I didn't. I just sat in the bathroom with the door locked and my back against the tub, breathing shallowly. That night, after dinner, the power flickered again. Just once, but it was enough to remind me how isolated we really were. That's when the landline rang. None of us had touched it. It hadn't rung once since we arrived. We looked at each other, startled. Chris picked it up. "Hello." Pause. Then he frowned and turned to me. "It's Dad. For you." I took the phone, nerves buzzing in my throat. But it wasn't just a check-in. He was coming up early. Said the system issues at work had resolved, and he'd be there by noon tomorrow. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I felt was pressure. Like time was running out. Like something that had been slow burning in the background was about to hit full flame, and I wasn't ready for it. He was going to be here by noon. That meant I had less than 18 hours before my husband walked through the door of this cabin, unaware that something had shifted while he was gone. Something small, yes. Unspoken, yes. But real and unfinished. The night passed in slow motion. Chris fell asleep early, headphones in, oblivious to the rising pressure in the room. Jalen and I stayed up later than we should have, not talking, not avoiding each other either. We played a few rounds of cards. The same game, over and over, not keeping score. It was just something to do with our hands while everything else in the air went unspoken. Then around midnight, he said it. I'm not good at pretending. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just kept his eyes on the cards in his hand, face unreadable. I swallowed. What are you pretending about? You know what I mean. I wanted to deny it, laugh it off. Anything to take the tension down a notch. But I didn't, because I did know. I didn't come here expecting this, I said quietly. He looked up then. Neither did I. But now we're here. And there it was, out in the open. Not an admission. Not a move. But a recognition. A weight shared. I stood up. My hands were cold, even though the fire was going. I started gathering the cards, giving myself something to focus on. I'm married to your best friend's father, I said. Flat. Direct. Trying to force the reality back into the room. I know. You're 10 years younger than me. 11. That almost made me laugh. Almost. Nothing's happened, I said, mostly to myself. Jalen stood too, slow and measured. No. But something is happening. Don't act like you don't feel it. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear him. I backed away a step, not from fear, but from the edge I could feel beneath my feet. It doesn't matter what I feel, I said. We're adults. We don't follow every impulse just because it's there. He stared at me, and for the first time since the trip began, he looked angry. Not loud or dramatic, just quietly, deeply frustrated. Then be honest, he said. Not with me. With yourself. Because if your marriage was really what you keep pretending it is, none of this would be happening. Not with me. Not with anyone. He turned and walked toward the hallway, not waiting for me to answer. At the edge of the doorway, he stopped. If I leave before your husband gets here, it's not because I want to, he said. It's because you want to keep pretending none of this is real. And then he was gone. I didn't sleep. The fire burned out, and I just sat there, curled in a blanket, watching the embers fade while everything inside me stayed lit. By sunrise, I hadn't moved. Chris eventually wandered in, stretching and yawning like it was just another day. Jalen's door was closed. No sounds came from behind it. I started packing my bag. My husband would be here in 2 hours. I didn't know if Jalen would still be here when he arrived. And worse, I didn't know what I wanted him to do. The suitcase was half-zipped when I heard the knock. Not on the front door. Not from outside. It came from Jalen's room. I froze. I hadn't heard him all morning. I'd assumed he left before dawn, quietly slipping away before my husband arrived. But now he was still here. I opened the door just enough to see him standing in the hallway, fully dressed, bag in hand. No eye contact. Just stillness. "I'm leaving," he said. I nodded. I figured. He looked like he wanted to say more. But instead, he stepped forward and held something out to me. A flash drive. "What's this?" I asked. "Just something you should see before he gets here." My stomach dropped. Jalen didn't wait for questions. He turned and walked out the door. This time, for real. I stood there a moment, staring at the flash drive in my hand. Whatever it was, it felt heavy. Wrong. But I plugged it into my laptop anyway. There was only one file. A video. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. It was grainy, handheld, like it had been shot in secret. Then the voices kicked in. Laughing, muffled conversation. One male, one female. Then the angle shifted and I saw them clearly. My husband. And someone else. Young, blonde. Definitely not me. They were in his office. After hours. The timestamp was just 2 weeks ago. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't breathe. So that's what this was. Jalen knew. He'd known the whole time. The late-night comment about me settling. The moment on the porch. The quiet rage behind his eyes. He hadn't just seen through me, he'd seen everything. And he'd kept quiet, until now. Chris walked into the room then, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded instinctively, then stopped. "No," I said. "Actually, no." He blinked. "What happened?" I looked at him for a long time. This boy, well, man, who'd been my stepson since he was 15. The reason I'd tried so hard to be good. To be stable. To stay. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice low. He frowned. "Know what?" I pointed toward the laptop. "Your dad. He's been seeing someone." Chris looked stunned. And then, something flickered across his face. Recognition. He looked down. "I didn't know for sure," he said. "But I've suspected." I stared at him. "And you never said anything?" He shrugged, jaw clenched. What was I supposed to say? I figured if you weren't asking questions, maybe you didn't want answers. That hurt more than it should have. Outside, a car door slammed. My heart stopped. "He's here," Chris said, walking toward the window. I didn't move. Everything that had felt uncertain just an hour ago was suddenly very, very clear. The lie wasn't the twist. The silence was. Everyone around me had known. Everyone had made their own peace with the truth except me. Now I had a choice. Pretend I hadn't seen it. Or finally act like someone who knew exactly where she stood. The moment the front door opened, it was like the entire cabin held its breath. My husband stepped inside, shaking off snow, a practiced smile on his face like nothing had changed. Like he hadn't been caught on video with someone who wasn't his wife. Like the world hadn't just shifted 3 inches to the left. He saw Chris first. "Hey, bud," he said. "How was the trip?" Chris just nodded. "Fine. Cold. Flat." Then his eyes landed on me. "Hey." His voice dropped. "You okay?" I didn't answer. Just watched him close the door and unzip his coat, as if this was just another weekend away. As if I hadn't seen proof. Heard the laughter. Watched him pull another woman close while I sat at home, organizing dinner plans. He reached out, maybe to hug me. I stepped back. "We need to talk," I said. Chris took that as his cue and disappeared into his room without a word. We sat down across from each other at the small dining table. The fireplace was out. The silence wasn't warm this time, it was clinical. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just opened the laptop, played the video, and let the truth speak for itself. My husband didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he closed the lid gently, leaned back in his chair, and sighed. I didn't mean for it to get that far, he said. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. You didn't mean to cheat on me? It was complicated. We were going through a rough patch, and I thought, no, I cut in. We weren't going through a rough patch. You were just lying. He looked tired. Like this was all inconvenient. I didn't tell you because I knew it would ruin everything. I thought maybe we could fix things first, and then it wouldn't matter. It does matter, I said. He didn't respond. For a moment, I felt the anger in my chest rise so hot it made me shake. But underneath it was something quieter. Something heavier. Grief. I had spent years folding myself into this marriage. Into schedules, holidays, birthdays that weren't mine, conversations where I had to remind myself to fit in, not stand out. I had become someone smaller to keep the peace. And now there was no peace to keep. You don't love me, I said. He looked like he wanted to argue. But he didn't. And that was my answer. I stood up, walked into the room I'd been staying in, and zipped up my suitcase. No hesitation this time. When I came back out, Chris was waiting in the hallway. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. I'll stay here a few more days, he said. Make sure he gets home safe. I nodded, grateful in a way I couldn't express. As I stepped out into the snow, a car pulled up on the road. Jalen. He turned around. He got out but didn't come any closer. Just stood there, watching me, waiting to see if I needed him. I met his eyes. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I walked past him, toward my car. He called after me. Where are you going? I paused. I don't know, I said. But I'm finally going somewhere on my own terms. I didn't expect to cry on the drive down the mountain, but I did. Not sobbing. Just quiet tears, the kind that come when you've finally stopped pretending everything's fine. I wasn't sad the marriage was over. Truthfully, it had been over for a long time. What hurt was realizing how much of myself I'd let go just to hold on to something that wasn't real. I stopped at a roadside diner 2 hours later. It was the kind of place with sticky tables and too much ketchup on everything. I ordered coffee, sat by the window, and finally let myself breathe. That's when Jalen walked in. He didn't sit down right away. Just gave me that look, soft, steady, like he was asking for permission without saying a word. I nodded. You came back. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I stirred my coffee. I'm not sure what okay looks like right now. He didn't try to fix it. Just sat there, letting the silence settle and without making it awkward. Eventually, I asked, how long have you known? About your husband, he said. A while. I didn't have proof until recently. And you still came on the trip? I didn't plan to say anything, he said. But then, you were different. You weren't pretending the way I thought you would. I looked out the window. The snow was starting to melt. Small patches of grass peeked through the ice. I kept waiting for things to get better, I said. For us to reconnect. I told myself the distance was temporary, that he was just stressed. But really, I was just scared of starting over. Starting over isn't the hard part, Jalen said. Believing you're allowed to, that's what stops people. That stuck with me. He didn't try to cross any lines. There was no grand confession, no dramatic kiss in the middle of the diner. That wasn't the kind of story we were in. At least, not yet. Instead, he asked, what now? And, for the first time, I had an answer. I'm going home. My home, I said. I'm going to repaint the walls, fix the loose cabinet door, finally get that ridiculous red couch I've always wanted. And after that? I don't know. But I'm going to stop waiting for someone else to tell me what I deserve. He smiled. That's a pretty good plan. We talked a little longer. Then he paid the check before I could argue and walked me to my car. He didn't ask for anything. Not a promise, not a hint of what we might become. He just said, Take care of yourself. And if you ever want to talk, you know how to find me. I did. And I will. 1 year later, I did buy the red couch. I did repaint the walls. And I did a lot of things I thought I never would, like traveling alone, taking a job that scared me, and saying yes to coffee dates without overthinking everything. Jalen and I stayed in touch. Slowly, naturally. No pressure. And eventually, it became more. Not rushed. Not reckless. Just right. Chris forgave me for walking away. He even thanked me. He said watching me leave helped him realize what kind of relationships he didn't want to settle for. And my ex? He didn't fight me. Maybe deep down, he knew it was the end too. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't losing something. It's admitting it wasn't yours anymore. But here's what I learned. You don't owe anyone your silence. Or your stillness. You're allowed to outgrow the things that once held you together. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally real, drama-rich stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.